Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to this conversation. We are here with conversation in the fifth element, o mujeres en el quinto elemento. Thank you for being here. Today, we have an amazing woman. She's unapologetic, spicy, honest, transparent, and she's an amazing friend of Christina as well.
Yeah, I'm super proud and happy to have this conversation with Amanda Sanfilippo. She, is going to blow your hearts and give a lot of inspiration to be really authentic, respectful, and shameless to talk about natural things and sex and more things. So enjoy this conversation and don't forget to subscribe below, click the bell, do all these things that you need to do for us to continue this amazing conversation with these women.
Uh-huh. A warning, it gets a tiny bit spicy today. Okay, enjoy.
Okay. Amanda, pues thank you so much for being with us today. It is a pleasure in many ways to have you. And one of the main things, but one of the things that I wanted to for you to come here to this space with me and Yolanda, this space of women in the fifth element. It's a space of co-creation that we have, and we invite these women that we admire and they have uh, wisdom and tools and experience to share with other women. And with you, you will do this amazing work with sex education. You have a radio host, you teach kids, and you live where you teach, which is pretty amazing. And I would like to for you to talk us about a little bit how did you started to, you know, start like what is the need? And I mean, you are. Or, I imagine that there's a lot of need, but what happened in you that you were like, okay, I'm going to. What is your career from the?
Yeah, well, how did I jump into it?
Yeah.
Or did I walk into it?
Yeah.
Well, I have been teaching for a long time to children and teaching in nature. And then a friend of mine said, oh, well, she was a doula, like for birth, like to support people to be held in birth and in the process of birth. And I thought, oh, I think I could do that because I supported you, Christina, and I was there for Sunny's birth, and I was there for my friend Lorna's baby's birth, and I was there for my two children when they came out of me. And so I had this really deep attraction to being able to support people in this initiation, the initiation of offering and of bringing life. And I also know that it's a process often in the hospital that is dominated by the American medical community, which is dominated by white men, which has nothing to do with the holistic process of birth, and that they try to control birth. And it's been a difficult thing for women to have the births that they could envision, which is without interference, without much interference, that they could have a dark room and like have it like warm and delicious and just have whoever they wanted there and have music and wear their own clothes and have nobody touching them that they didn't want to touch them, and that the baby could come the way they envisioned it. And even if it didn't come the way they envisioned it, that they could have some empowerment in their body and have a deeper connection to this incredible process, right? It's a pretty powerful initiation. So I was drawn to supporting people, women and whoever, all folks that might be able to give birth. And so I went in and I got a doula training in San Francisco, and then I worked for the Homeless Prenatal Project, which is this beautiful project where homeless women and immigrant women who don't have resources So they may not always be homeless, but they might be in transition, or they may be immigrants and just not have support in the medical system, because I'm sorry to say that in many cases, the medical system doesn't respect women, and especially when it comes to birth. So, and especially if you don't have resources or you don't have advocacy with your own voice to say and believe that you get to say what you want. Believe that you're the person.
Yeah, you're bringing you're bringing a life into the world.
Bringing the life into the world, and that your body is very capable. Mostly, I'm not saying all the time, that sometimes you do need the support of the medical system, but it's also the way we give support, right? So I worked with the homeless prenatal project as a doula, and the clients, like, they didn't know their bodies.
Oh.
They didn't know why they had their period. They didn't know what was happening when the baby or the fetal tissue was growing. And so that was really interesting to me, and it was revealing how little education and support we have as young people and young girls around embodiment and around knowing where we are in our sexual lives. Like, and also, you know, there's a lot of I mean, this is a trigger warning, but there's a lot of molestation for young people and young women. So I'm just going to say that for this whole conversation, I may talk about things that just be aware, whoever's watching, that I may talk about sexual violations, not in detail, but just the fact that they happen. And so even people going in to give birth, when somebody touches them, they can disassociate. And how do we honor that disassociation and not undermine it, and allow people to have as much information as they can around their bodies and their cycles and their relationship to sex? So that inspired me. And I had taught sexual education to some kids in a homeschool setting, and I am my degree is in environmental science. So the relationship between nature and our pleasure and our sexual reproductive processes is so profound. And I'm a beekeeper, and in the ancient days, beekeeping was held by a sex cult of women in Greece. So beekeepers would take in peoples as initiates and do sexual magic. And honey and bees are very much a part of this sun energy and warmth and sexual pleasure. So all of those things of my life kind of were intertwining. And also just the fact, like, this new being is coming into the world. Shouldn't they be just held in incredible light and warmth? And from my Fae tradition, I was like, I can be a fairy godmother. As long as I get consent, I can, like, bless these babies, right? And they're gonna, all the support we can give the beings that are coming in to this time, all the support we can give them, the more resilience they'll have to meet the challenges and the joys that come. So that was a profound way that I moved into. Then I was like, wow, these people don't know about their bodies. Children don't know how to say the names of their sexual organs. There's shame. There's shame around saying penis. There's shame around saying vagina. There's shame around saying nipple or balls or whatever. And it's like, why? If we liberate that, imagine the liberation. Imagine how much freedom would come.
Totally. The space.
And when you start having all this realization, when you start having all this awareness that all those different aspects that you have been living started to weave together, right? In many ways, how do you directly went into create something about it? Where did you go? Because one of the things that always stand up for me about you is your capacity to create and build community. Is building this community related in the way that you directly engage into start doing something with this?
Well, I think that as far as, like, building community around the work. I think that everybody wants to feel pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
We're built to have pleasure. We're actually built to enjoy. Like, we're not built to be cruel. We're not built to enjoy pain. I mean, pain is fun too. I like pain, don't get me wrong. But, you know, and also the research around sexual enjoyment in relation to sensuality, I think people are curious. Like, one person said to me, who's a sex worker, I have many friends who are sex workers, who are full service sex workers or work online or all of this. And you know, pornography is holds the most space on the internet, So people like to have pleasure, for sure, sexual pleasure. So it's not hard to build community around that conversation. It's just hard to make it accessible to people who have shame. And so I think for me, building the community, it's easier when you are working in the realm of women's health, right? So like through birth. And then I was like, oh, and I'm a teacher, so maybe I can support families or schools. So what I decided to do was, I moved to New Orleans. But it wasn't a good time. And I did not have community here. Christy can tell you. It was really intense, and I was really alone, and I didn't have community. I had community back in California. Mm-hmm. So I decided I would study pre-nursing. I decided I would go to school. So that's one thing. I think that how I build community is that I go to learn, and wherever there's curiosity, there's community.
I think one of the things that you have, no, and that's what you are, is like saying the things clear, you know. It's like, okay, if there's some shame here, you recognize that sexual education, there's a lot of shame that has not allowed this to be in society, but it's the way that you say it, like, so normal, that is what it should be. Everybody should be that way, no? But it's not. I know, but you say in a way that is like, yeah, all this conversation.
And I think it can be sexy too. I love sexy, don't get me wrong, but I also think consent can be really sexy. And I also think that the way society has, or culture, Western white supremacist patriarchal culture has set it up, is that if we don't have our embodiment, then we're not free. If we imagine the liberation of just being able to have men hold hands, of us to not have that shame around our bodies. Imagine how pleasure can be an act of defiance. And especially for women and people of color and Black folks in America, where we've been objectified to be giving pleasure, but we don't really have the tools to receive in a way that feels empowered, right? Like, empowered receiving is something so amazing. And Audre Lorde speaks about like self-care as an act of political defiance. Because if we care for ourselves, then we can see what the challenges are that are not compassionate, that are not caring for others, you know? And I think that that's a part of pleasure activism that's really potent, which is how to receive and feel empowered in receiving, and allowing our bodies to open to that.
And how did you? I'm very interested in this project you did. Like, I think it's called, I have it here, Creative Community.
Creative Community League. Yeah.
Yeah, I am very interested because there you include your podcast, you include also the film festival. That I want you to talk to me a little bit about that.
Oh yeah.
And all these that you did with the artist, and this mini thing that you did. I'm very, very interested in that project. So how did it start? Why did you start it? And how everything comes together and what you got from it?
Well, Creative Community League came together because I am also an abortion doula. So I just want to speak very clearly that abortion is our right. It is not against the law, and we can shift our consciousness around abortion. And I help people before, during, and after abortion. And so a woman named Amy Irvin, who started the New Orleans Abortion Fund, because it's you can't get an abortion in Louisiana and in many states. You can't get your insurance to cover it. So only wealthy women can get abortions without paying a lot of money, or they pay a lot of money to their private doctors. So I met this woman, Amy Irvin, and I was alone, and I was like, okay, how can I support women in abortion? And I made a pamphlet, and I brought it to her saying, can you put this in the abortion clinic? And she said, I'll ask, it's a little tricky, but I'll ask. And then I stayed in touch, and I became a client services person. So listening to people who needed abortions. And then I would, say, okay, we can get you money to get you there, or whatever they needed. And then I also became a clinic escort. So women that would go into the clinic, I volunteered through the New Orleans Abortion Fund. So Amy Irvin called me, and she's like, hey, do you want to do a radio show with me? Because she knew I was doing like my own workshops, like sex ed workshops for adults. So I would do those at like like at this library, or at a venue. I would just do these free sex ed workshops for adults. And so she knew that, and she's like, do you want to do this radio show with me? So I said yes. And then I volunteered for about 1.5 years doing that. And then she said, I'm going to stop being the executive director of the New Orleans Abortion Fund, and I'm going to get a grant for us, and I'm going to hire you part-time, and it's going to be called, let's call it Creative Community League, because I'm an artist as well. And most of my friends are artists. Most of my friends are queer artists, I would say. Alternative folks, for sure. Alternative to the mainstream, but as are you, right? Like both of you, like having this conversation, having these beautiful conversations about other ways to engage and to create culture the way we would love to see, that's more inclusive and more expansive. So I said, yeah, I'll jump on. So we created Creative Community League, and she said, I want to support artists as activists. So we got the money, and we started doing the programming. And we did this programming where we wanted to give Louisiana artists, especially in rural southern Louisiana, opportunity, those who were making art that was sexually about sexual liberation or about reproductive health, even if it wasn't explicitly about that, but if it was like pictures of roses, or it was just something where you could feel the sensuality of embodiment, right? And that they aligned with the mission of feminism, of broad spectrum feminism, not the narrow feminism, but a very broad, inclusive feminism. So what happened was I was going to go to these small towns, and I was going to try and find artists and go to libraries and community centers. And then the pandemic came. And so we couldn't go we couldn't go in person. So I was like, hey, Amy, why don't we have a film festival, an online film festival? As instead of this program where we go in, I would teach and meet people, we could have an online feminist film festival. So we redirected some of the funds to go to this film festival. So we developed this film festival called Outgaze Film Festival, which is really a beautiful...
Something that you have never done before.
Never.
I mean, you were like, okay, why? That's what I see in you. You go to a place and you're like, okay, you see that there's a need from here, and you take it, you make it happen. It's like, what we can do that I can bring some actors now. Film festival, and you started. And how was that?
I just like, I don't know. I mean, I've failed at many things, and I'm not dead. So like, you try things and you can fail, and you're not going to die. And yes, people are going to make fun of you. And yes, people make fun of me all the time. And, sometimes I know I feel threatening to people because I'm not as afraid to be myself. But I know, and I recognize that, and that's part of my shadow. I have to be aware, like, oh, you're a big personality.
Yeah, it's like where the more light you bring, then you start to see the shadow, no? And people,
Exactly.
but what I see in you is like, you create this festival and amazing movies you brought. That is some of them they won prizes. No, you were telling me.
Oh yeah, a lot of them. Well, so we did them in blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So we did one, Our Bodies Are Shadows, one about ritual and resistance, and then one about, I forget, I was like something about light and resilience, and just, so there were 3 different blocks, beautiful blocks of short films, and then a feature for each one. And they basically address the different elements of our tagline, which is embodiment, inclusivity, and resilience as resistance. And
That's beautiful. That is right there is just amazing, right? How
yeah,
to put of that as a
Wow.
way of resistance. The resistance can be so subtle, right? But so intense at the same time.
right. And it's what many folks who are marginalized have, is that we have resilience, and that's how we carry on. And I think that's something that I guess I get to embody, is resilience. Like, things happen. I mean, like Chrissy knows, like, many things happen. I mean, I did have a hemorrhage on my brain 2 years ago. Like, I mean, and I do think that I'm blessed, and that's where this blessing of thanking my friends and my family and my ancestors, and being really passionately grateful and passionately aware of my privilege, in order to use it to serve my friends and family and my children and grandchildren. I'm totally aware of that. Like, and I think that one of the gifts of the privilege that I have is to step into it with as much love as I can, and to share what I can, and to be checked where I need to be checked, right? And one thing I have to say is that there's a lot of discomfort of being alone. There's a lot of discomfort of trying new things that you haven't done before. And I guess because I've had like abuse in my childhood, and discomfort is just like part of like this weird
Fabric, right?
fabric.
Your own fabric.
Yeah, like, and so I'm like, oh, discomfort, yeah, I know all about that. Okay, I'll keep coming back for more, so I think that that's part of my shadow too, but it also gives me this beautiful force to move forward, and to not be afraid that I might mess up. And I do get criticism. I'm not great at everything I do, but I do think that I want to just say Meryl Merman is the co-curator, and she's brilliant. And she is a Lebanese American, and acknowledging that without her, this festival just wouldn't happen. I called her. I was like, Meryl, you want to do this festival? Because she was doing a feminist film festival in New Orleans that basically got shut down because of patriarchy, because men tried to take it over. So I was like, Meryl, would you want to do this festival? And she's like, yeah, I would love to. And so she's my collaborator and curator, and she is a filmmaker. And then I have Maya Holtzinger, who is like my partner, and in many ways, and she is a filmmaker, and I've been helping her with her film. So I just have a community of artists and filmmakers. So I really want to recognize, like, I hear you like saying, oh wow, you're doing all this, but I couldn't do it without these brilliant people around me.
And that's what what I wanted to thank you for saying that, because for me, I respect you and admire you a lot, and I wanted to bring all this that you have done. And what you said is like, I have not done it by myself. I have not done it by myself. I do it with all this, the community that you went to a few years ago to New Orleans. You didn't know anybody. You didn't know anybody, and then you create a community of artists and an amazing people as you are, your friends, your community, and from that connection and from where you're going, things happen and you are feeling uncomfortable or whatever, but it's like, okay, this is opportunity, I'm going to do it, and like you said, there's a lot of people that they can do criticize you, but they are not in the arena, or maybe they're in the arena or whatever, but it's like, they're criticizing you because you are being seen for certain things.
Yeah, and
And
some of the criticism is real, and I
yeah,
recognize like sometimes we need to be checked, and I think the only way I can get checked is if I put myself out there. Like I'm not
Yeah.
gonna get checked if I'm quiet. Like I don't get checked that way, but that's the way I move, and I don't. I think that also honoring, like you said, Chrissy, like the way you and Yolanda move, like there's all these beautiful streams that can come together in the way we move and the way we offer. And I really appreciate that. And one thing is that I do miss making art, like I did do a performance piece here in a festival, the Vanishing Performance Festival, which can't happen because of COVID. But I did a piece called Dark Matter, Dark Mother. And because
yeah,
matter, the origin of the word is mater, which is mother.
Mother.
So, and I worship in my devotional practice. I am devoted to the Dark Mother from a spiritual perspective. So I do miss being an artist, but it's also really profound to be able to support artists that are speaking to the issues that are coming up in the world in these magical and direct ways as well. Like some of the films were really just about personal stories, like coming out of the Ukraine, the film Lilac, which just is at the Berlinennial or something. I can't say the word, but it's in this film festival in Berlin, and it just won an accolade. There's a film La Rumarosa out of Mexico by Patricia Montoya that is about a beautiful film with memory and like has memory and visuals, and it's about women, femicide and rape, but you don't see that. But she's on a bus riding through. The music is so beautiful, and she's just gotten some accolades as well. And then there's this film Double Up, which was about two Black women, an older Black woman playing the cello and a young Black woman dancing, and that one has like this celebration, and that also just won an award. And then there's one about called Shahrazad's Diary, which I think was one of the
Oh, that's beautiful.
amazing. It was amazing. It was about Zaina Dahak, who is a Lebanese woman who does a thing called Catharsis, which is a theater and drama therapy in prisons. And she went into a woman's prison, and they made this whole theater piece from a diary that a woman had left there. And it seems heavy, but it was actually such a celebration and such a beautiful film. So, and then, there was a film out of Myanmar, and I don't know if you know what's happening in Myanmar right now. When I traveled to Myanmar, when Aung San Suu Kyi got out of house arrest, and I had to smuggle films in. I smuggled these films in because they were still under military, and now they're back to military. And there was a film that we projected called Mother, Daughter, Sister, about rape in the Rohingya and Kachin refugee camps in Myanmar. And so right now, it's getting worse. It's not getting better, because right now it's a huge lockdown and lots of people are just ignoring it. And so I feel like this festival, it met like the film Lilac just meets about these women coming together, kind of like our conversation now, and just talking about like their sex lives and talking about breast cancer and things like this that are difficult to talk about in the Ukraine. Like you have to just get together with your girls,
Yeah, and yet I think we are arriving to a point, kind of like an intersection, right? In which, in order to continue and to celebrate the women we are, we need to include everything that has been happening, that it was not at the table. It was kind of like pushing away or touch it in a very slight way, but not we didn't want, even as women, I think many times we didn't want to have to go through this trauma, right? Of any case. So bringing all of this together, and if it's curated the way you are talking about, it can be seen and can be also processed.
Exactly. And I think that's the part where it's like allowing women to have voice, right? In the cinema, and in all arts, and to be seen. So this festival, and the festival's free. We don't have the funds to do it this year. We did it on a shoestring in love. So we're trying to fundraise. But the fact that the festival was free meant that if you had internet, you could see the festival. And I know that they're digital deserts. And I know even in Louisiana, even in the city of New Orleans, a third of the population doesn't have internet, because poverty means that there's no computers and no internet. So I just want to recognize that. Like, that's why one reason I do a radio show, because everybody has access to radio. So accessibility is important. But I think
Is this festival still online that people can see it,
no,
Amanda?
it costs money to have the platform to show the films. But we're going to try for 2022. We're working on it. But I think that, like, Jill Soloway, who is a famous Hollywood, and she wrote Transparent and does a lot of like I Love Dick. She did that show. She says there's a TED Talk where she says to a group of master students in film I think in Michigan, she goes, if men just stop making film right now, we would have more understanding of what others' voices are. Like, if you could just hold back, because for the last 150 years, almost every projection of a woman has been from a male perspective. And so part of this film festival is to see queer, trans women, how their perspective of themselves and of the world is very different. And the women aren't objectified, right? And not only that the festival is very focused on how the film was produced, the production of the film. So women can make films and still be not very kind, or having self-care or care for the community, because that's the tradition of this industry. That's the tradition of many industries, right? It comes from a patriarchal perspective of not caring about the way things are done, right? Or I talked about this around birth, right? Not being sensitive, because it's about money. It's about power, not power aligned power, but power above, right? And so even when we go to the films, we ask about production methods. And so there's these panel discussions. If you go to Outgaze Film Festival, if you go to the website, you can look and still see the panel discussions. And one of them is about self-care. And a lot of the filmmakers came on, and there's this part of that conversation where they talk about making a film as a ritual, that you take time to do ritual practices, whatever that may look like for you, in the process of making a film as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and you said that we can watch that in the internet. You still have it, the panel?
Yes, you can still watch the panel discussions, and they're beautiful. They're really amazing. There's one of them that also talks about domestic violence and how the domestic violence has raised during COVID exponentially.
So it reminds me, when you were saying that, it reminds me like the matriarchal, no, the women, we are like, in a way, everybody comes to the house, we prepare the food, and the same thing is like you make the movie, and it's like you take care of the other ways, no? And it's pretty cool to raise that, awareness that there's other ways that you can do this, and this way is like, more like inclusive and has other elements in the creation, no, not so much like directed. I mean, it can be directed, obviously, no, because of direction and all that, but to bring these other elements in the picture, I like it a lot.
Yeah, just that we have other approaches, like I took a class and they were like, well, what about if women made computers? Maybe they wouldn't be square. Like every system in this country, America, I can say, is designed, implemented, and powered by a very specific perspective, and it's limited. And as an environmental scientist, I know that diversity is what's going to save us.
Yeah.
Like plants and animals, if they have only one way, they're going to end. But to have a massive, like incredibly expanded vision from all possibilities, you have more solutions. You have more ways to approach. That this one way of the culture that's implemented now, that comes out of white supremacist patriarchy, is only one way.
Yeah.
There are models that are different. The Kunsan people of South Africa, the Iroquois people, there's many indigenous tribes that are matriarchal or where there's a balance, a really deep balance of how we approach life, right? I think I do think that rape and domestic violence and birth and death and those places is where the revolution can start.
And you started it. I mean, I think the most amazing part of you, is not only that you work on these things, that you create events like this, it is like you live it every day with every single word you're speaking. You are bringing this always into the conversation, and that is amazing, because it takes also to find the language that this language that can be so contagious, right? That everybody can start talking about rape or sex, or in a way that we don't put a blanket and we cover ourselves underneath, right? That we need the vocabulary to talk more about this.
I agree. Yeah. Thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah. I think that, somebody said to me, my friend who's a full service sex worker, brilliant person. And she's talking to me one time and she said, I talk about sex all the time. And people are like, why do you talk about sex all the time? And she's like, well, why do you talk about books all the time? Why do you talk about art all the time? Why do you talk about physics all the time? Sex is like how we got here. Let's talk about sex all the time. There's a lot to talk about. And it's beautiful. And it's amazing. And it's complicated. And it's dark. And it's got... How many works of art are initiated by our sensual and romantic and sexual desire? Like, I don't know, I would say a good portion. So we're willing to look at the art, we're willing to read the books, but we're not willing to just have a conversation and just talk about like, oh, damn, I had great sex last night at the dinner table in front of the children. Right? Like, baby, that was incredible.
I know. Yeah, there's still a lot to hear.
Shame. And then shame is associated with their bodies.
Yeah.
And that our bodies are not shameful.
Yeah.
Our bodies are vessels of gorgeous pleasure and of divine wisdom.
No, totally. You were saying that, and I remember this time I met this guy from Cuba that he was amazing dancer and fun and great guy, and he was telling us like, you guys, in our country, we don't have a lot of food. We don't talk about, we don't make jokes about that. We talk about sex. Sex is like the normal thing, and you guys here is like talking about sex is something like kind of horrible. We don't have maybe a lot of like, I don't know what he was saying, like, the way that you see us as like third world country, and we see you as a third world country, totally, because there's like no. It's normal. That's why we're here. We came this way. There's a lot of power in that, and not a lot of like, layers in their culture. That's what he was saying.
Right.
You're right. We think that we are like a developed country, and not at all in this way. Yeah.
Not in that way. Yeah. And I think that's important. And I think also to normalize it and also to respect, like, yeah, like maybe you don't, maybe you're private, maybe you don't want to talk about it. To respect however you are is fine. Like not everybody wants to talk about it, but to shame somebody because they do is the other thing, right? Like we celebrate those people who push it back, but then look at like we can talk about, I mean, we can talk about, like 90% of the movies are about killing people.
Yeah.
Right? And blood. But you can't talk about your period on the bus,
It's
right?
crazy.
You can't say, hey, to your boyfriend, can you go get me some tampons? Because I'm bleeding really heavily. Right? But no, you can talk about a movie where they shoot people all over the place and there's blood all over and there's guts and everything. But the blood that comes out of us, that supports,
Like naturally.
supports the rhythmical quality of our of the moon cycle, like we can't talk about it. Like it's shameful. It's just like, that's a very, and also I think internally it rips us out open. It makes us not whole because we don't really deeply cognitively understand, like, why are we having war and blood everywhere? But then internally I can't speak to what's happening with me. Like people are afraid of me because I bleed. Or, so I think that that's also a dissonance. Like there's this dissonance that we are trying to heal. Like that's part of my magic, is to try to bring us into a healing space of awareness around embodiment, being really a deeply political and radical thing that doesn't have to be, that could just be life.
Yeah.
Amanda, thank you so much for bringing the magic today, because that's what you do, bringing the magic of the moment. So red, also, your red roses there.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to see you both. You're both of such inspirations to me as well.
You are.
Yeah, you are an inspiration. Thank you for being so fresh and authentic. And for bringing us that quality in the conversation of authenticity, and wholeness. And it's just like, thank you so much. It was wonderful to be with you, Amanda.
You too. Muchos besos, amor.
Muchos besos, guapísima. Sigue así de guapa.
Tú también.